This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time!
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah!
I finished these fights.
Give me a hell yeah!
Top Rope Nation.
Learn to love it. It's the best thing going today.
Settle in, grab a beer, and turn up those headphones. This is episode 57 of Top Rope Nation, your one stop for the best in professional wrestling talk. I'm Ryan Drosty, joined here by Justin Joint, Kyle Ross, for our weekly edition of wrestling podcasting. And this is going to be a little bit different than our usual shows because as I introduce one of my co-hosts here, Justin and I, who both live in the same town, are currently dealing with a possible incoming tornado. So this is going to be the tornado show of Top Rope Nation. Things could get interesting here in the next hour. Justin, how are you doing over there across town? Is everything going all right at your household?
So far, so good, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little nervous. Tornadoes, sharks, and 7-hour long wrestling shows. Those are my biggest fears.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm down in my basement recording this where I usually am, so I feel kind of safe, but my wife is upstairs, so if I hear any yelling or screaming, we might have to just like hit pause in the old record button here. You guys even get, Kyle Ross, our other co-host here, do you guys even get tornadoes in Ohio? We're kind of in Tornado Alley over here in Iowa. I don't know. What's the tornado situation in Ohio?
They're rare, but they can happen. I'm also in my basement as we speak, but for a much different reason. Right before we started recording, much more lighthearted issues that I'm dealing with here in Cleveland. Walked outside, looked in the pond. I'm not a zoologist, but I saw 12 frogs in our pond that we've got in the backyard engaging in what appeared to be a mass orgy, and they are loud. I mean,
I cannot imagine the noise that was coming from that pond.
It's not. I can kind of hear it down here, even with the headphones on. Like, my dogs are going insane just listening to just a dozen frogs fucking their brains out.
What a podcast this has already been, guys.
Yeah, I know. And by the way, if the tornado hits, should I keep talking or should I assume that the recording equipment's no longer working?
We're going to be like, Kyle, got to go, take over.
Yeah,
I'll just like leave the recorder going. We'll capture the audio and you'll hear me like screaming like a little girl in the background.
It'll be the lost tapes we can,
I do want to clarify because we mentioned we were recording here in our basements. We are homeowners. We are not your stereotypical wrestling fans.
Oh, here we go.
Living with their living with their parents down in the basement, criticizing professional wrestling. That is not the Top Rope Nation crew. That is not how we roll. We actually are responsible adults most times.
But God bless. Hey, look, it's a tough economy. Okay, let me tell you something. I don't think the presidents in either party have done a great job since World War II. So if you're still struggling and living with mom and dad, God bless you, and we welcome you to listen to the show, too.
And, that's a good segue, because if you are struggling, if you guys haven't seen on our Twitter account, @TopRopePod, if you're a listener, we are giving away free merchandise to one lucky winner. All you have to do, the tweet is pinned at the top of our page, is retweet this tweet I put up, go to iTunes, leave us a review, put in your Twitter username in the review so we know who you are. And on next week's show, on May 10th, we will be drawing a winner, and that winner will get to choose any of the t-shirts from our shop, which you can get to via topropenation.com. Any size you want. We've got several great designs. You got the old Top Rope Nation logo shirt. We've got the Grab a Hold, Tell a Story shirt, courtesy of Kyle Ross. We got Johnny New Japan, also courtesy of Kyle Ross. We've got the Wrestle or Die shirt, if you're a history lover, kind of based off the old Revolution era cartoon, Join or Die, but it's Wrestle or Die. We got some good stuff. So all you do, Top Rope Pod on Twitter, retweet that tweet, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. You can check out our entire history of podcasts on iTunes, topropenation.com. Like I said, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher Radio, wherever podcasts are found. So as we move into the discussion portion here, guys, on what's going on in pro wrestling, we're coming off of the greatest Royal Rumble show last Friday, and we spent considerable amount of time talking about the controversy related to that show last week. Actually, I thought it was one of our better discussions we've had in quite some time. I think about the first 20 minutes of the show we talked about that. And Kyle, you had texted me, I was like the next day, a couple days later, that you thought of even more you wanted to say, and we didn't get it in. Then we saw the show, so we thought we could kind of, tie up any loose ends related to Greatest Royal Rumble and any closing thoughts on that situation. I'm going to throw it right to Kyle because I know this is still on your mind. So what do you got to say?
Yeah, man, I don't know about you guys. I was just thinking about it a lot, and everyone was talking about it on Twitter leading up to the show, both pro and mostly con. But, an issue started sticking with me. This is, I'm going to play both sides of the coin here. An issue is sticking with me about the concept of legislating morality. And the U.S.'s role in that, doing it. So here's my point, okay? Triple H made the comment about, well, even if you don't agree with another culture, it doesn't mean it's irrelevant. You need to respect them. And and for those critical of the WWE for going over there are certainly valid reasons to feel that way. I started thinking of that, and I don't want to get way off topic, too late, but I'm not a big legislating morality guy. I mean, I could go into how I think it's an issue the Democratic Party needs to rectify moving forward, but that's a different podcast for a different day. And I'm thinking, all right, obviously Saudi Arabia is at the very most end of the spectrum in terms of egregiousness, right, with human rights. Mm-hmm. But could you argue that the WWE shouldn't do business in Alabama because, they still celebrate Confederate Memorial Day there? 45% of the population wanted to vote for a guy who would have been a bad senatorial candidate in 1952, just last November. Right?
That's true.
And so my argument, and I hate the slippery slope argument because it can be used against me in some ways, I feel, on other issues, but it was dirty. Look, here's the bottom line. They took a lot of dirty oil money to do this show. I watched it. Like I said last week, if you didn't want to watch it, it's your own prerogative, and I'm not going to besmirch you, to quote William Regal. But where you draw the line remains kind of a hard. We talked about that a lot last week. I thought that's when the discussion got really good. Is, as a wrestling fan, when do you draw the line? If you've ever drawn it at all. I talked about the Chris Benoit murder suicide. Now I stopped watching, but I was thinking of that, and I'm like, man, this could go a lot of places. The whole idea of, well, we're not going to do business there because we don't agree with these people. Well, you could really start applying that to a lot of other places, and it could be a slippery slope. Like I said, Saudi Arabia is absolutely on the egregious end of the spectrum when it comes to that stuff. But I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out there. It was a thought I had burning in my craw on Friday afternoon. What did you guys think about it?
Well, as you mentioned Alabama specifically there, I had to pull up our download numbers and make sure we didn't have a massive following in Alabama. So we do have some downloads in Alabama, but it's not one of our most downloaded states as I look at the stats here. Okay. No, I know what you are. I know what you're saying for sure, and it's a good argument. I think you also have to be careful. If you start doing like the whole what about stuff, Saudi Arabia has all these problems, which are, of course, beyond anything in the United States.
And we need to bring this up too. It's certainly not the WWE's role.
No.
But is it the United States' role to change it? As bad as it is. And people, this is an interesting topic that people who are tuning in to hear about professional wrestling discussion that they're getting. But is it the United States' role to change the way they think in Saudi Arabia. Because one could argue, and I'll get into this later on when I am more critical of the show, of some stuff that happened during the course of the Greatest Royal Rumble Ever show, that's gotten the United States into trouble in that region when we think we know best. We're going to go over there, sprinkle some star-spangled awesome democracy on these people, and all's going to be right with the world. Well, I got news for you. That ain't happened in 40 years.
Yeah, well, that's a whole different argument, but yeah, I think it kind of depends. It depends on if people are losing their lives. What are the issues we're talking about? Is it customs? Is it life and death? The amount of people that are being affected are all relevant there. But what I was gonna say with the the whole whataboutism stuff is that what's going on there with putting gay people to death. It's probably beyond the issues here in the United States. So, like, I feel like if you paint everything with, yes, but we also do bad stuff here, and they do bad stuff in Alabama and, wherever, then you get into the situation where nothing is wrong. Because you can always say, well, but someone else does something bad, too. And then, like, I think it demeans a wrong if you're always pointing to somebody else doing a wrong. Like, there's
I agree,
always
and that's what... I agree, and that's why I generally hate the slippery slope argument. I'm just saying, I can see it gaining traction.
Yeah.
And it's interesting sometimes how different sides of the political spectrum will use the slippery slope when it's convenient to their beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think last week on the show, I was pretty anti WWE doing business there. You seemed a little more open to it. Justin was kind of in the middle. Did you guys feel any differently, like the day after when the government of Saudi Arabia issued the apology because they aired a commercial that featured a woman on it? Like, what, Justin? Let me bring you in here. What do you think when you heard about that?
I'm just a complete lack of surprise. I mean, it wasn't shocking to me at all. I mean, I kind of felt dirty about the whole thing anyway, so that just kind of added to it, especially with it seemingly coming out that Sami Zayn was withheld from the show because of some of his Syrian descent. That's keeping somebody off of a show because of ethnicity. And I don't know, just the thing I loved was after watching the show is that it wasn't the greatest Royal Rumble. It was the greatest house show.
That was a great tweet that you had.
Although Meltzer made kind of a funny comment, which have been few and far between of late, but in the Observer, he said, people were saying that, but don't tell that to the WWE employees who were like, behind the scenes, who worked their ass off to get, that show going. That was kind of, I think to the audience, not just Justin, a large part of the audience, came off as a house show.
Mm-hmm. And how wrong we were, because we got no world title changes. We thought maybe both would change hands. Instead, we got no world title changes. So
it made sense given that it was a paid novelty show. To be honest with you, although we're going to talk about Roman and where he stands now, but with AJ and Nakamura, okay, if you're going to change that title, it probably makes more sense to do a Backlash than it does, on a show on Saudi Arabia at 4 p.m. when half your audience might not be watching live. Mm-hmm. There are two things, by the way, because I don't want to necessarily be painted in as a pro WWE guy in this situation. There are two things that happened during the course of that show that were, I thought, pretty foul. One was the video they showed during the intermission, which was in essence a propaganda piece for Saudi Arabia about, it made it seem, oh, what a nice progressive place this is. Mm-hmm. Come on. This isn't like when Snickers sponsors a show and we make silly commercials in between. This is something very different. I mean, that was foul. And then to kind of like, they doubled down on it on Raw. I was like, oh, come on, guys. You took your dirty oil money, but let's not, Yeah, I think
the statement from the government the next day kind of proved nothing is really changing as it
Hell,
relates to
what should we expect?
genders.
We're sitting here talking about the state of Saudi Arabian politics, and here's a country where women are just starting to get some rights, and lo and behold, they're living about that women weren't allowed on the show, and lo and behold, they're apologizing for women being on the show, even in that regard.
Yeah,
like Justin said, it shouldn't be that surprising that was their response to throw WWE under the bus.
Yeah, well, it's kind of ironic. I don't want to get too historical on this show, even though that is my Twitter hashtag historical Ryan or username. But it's kind of ironic though, as us as Americans making this argument about how bad Saudi Arabia is with women's rights and stuff, because if you rewind 100 years, the U.S. was actually kind of on the slow curve as it relates to women's rights,
which is part of it. With the U.S. is I have this, people get pissed off at this, but so what? You can direct your angry tweets just to me individually. I always have this saying: the United States is not the greatest country in the world. All the other ones just happen to be a little bit worse.
Well, I'm not comparing the situations. I don't want anyone to misunderstand me. We're talking about different levels of committing a wrong here. But when the U.S. gave women the right to vote in 1920, that was way behind the curve of many, many other countries on Earth. And it's crazy. Women have not even been able to vote in the United States for 100 years yet. And we still haven't had a woman president when most industrialized countries have had women leaders. So we are kind of behind the curve still. We're not Saudi Arabia, don't get me wrong, but
no,
we got our own issues, that's for sure.
How did you guys feel, by the way? This was my one thing, because to be honest with you, this was the thing that I thought was the most foul, and it seemed that most people didn't care about it, was the Saudi Arabia-Iran skit they did. I thought that was so bad, actually. It drew the most heat on the show, and normally I would kind of just write that off as whatever, standard xenophobic pro wrestling angle. But going back to some of the stuff I said last week, that's to me, exhibit A of bad U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. That was the WWE's version of our awful Middle Eastern foreign policy, because we're all the same age, right? And growing up, the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran was painted as this horrible monster, right? And truthfully, he and I, were never destined to have dinner together. But if you look at the history of the U.S. and Iran, didn't he have every right to be pissed off that we overthrew a democratically elected leader? And my point here is Saudi Arabia, is no better than Iran. And the fact that we've chosen a side, and that should be mentioned here, the WWE is not doing anything that the United States doesn't endorse. The United States as a nation has dealings with Saudi Arabia, which is a problem with our Middle Eastern policy, which I keep harping on. I thought aside, the stuff that Davari tweeted was very serious, obviously, but I just thought that was so emblematic of bad United States foreign policy, that segment. And it actually moderately offended me that they did it.
Yeah, there was that got some play in the media, that's for sure. Justin,
I sure shit fast forwarded through that segment.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't watch it at the time. I was watching on delay, so Kyle, you watched it live, so you couldn't fast forward. But no, I just kind of Googled it, and
I was not live at the time. That was after, when people. I'll tell you what. Here's another little behind the curtain reference. When people talk about this Greatest Royal Rumble ever pay-per-view, and I think about it a year from now.
Oh God, I know where this is going.
I'm just gonna remember. I'm just gonna remember peeking through the crack of my bathroom door, watching it as I was relegated to toilet duty for a large portion of that show.
You were having a rough afternoon, man.
Ooh, baby. I'll tell you what. Anyone lives here in Independence, Ohio, maybe steer clear of the Quaker Steak and Lube on Canal Road. Oh, boy.
Kyle's like, guys, we're good friends, right? I could be real honest with you. He's like, I'm going to tell you what's going on in my house right now.
Yeah.
Oh, that was hilarious.
Diarrhea.
Now, when I searched Saudi Arabia, Iran, WWE, one of the first things that popped up was an article on the Daily Beast, which is kind of a political commentary website, and they've got a whole article blasting it. The first line is, Saudi Arabia used the men of World Wrestling Entertainment, owned by the husband of Trump cabinet member Linda McMahon, to put out anti-Shiite propaganda.
Yeah, and people are probably tired of me talking about it, but there was a front line that really opened my eyes. I happened to watch it just randomly about 2 months ago, on the history of Saudi Arabia versus Iran and the United States' role in it, and how we've really stupidly, quite frankly, taken a side, and that has bit us in the ass. And I don't know. Well, so it was an all too familiar verse, I thought, and so. It's funny. My wife, who I thought would be like the kind of person like offended by a skit like that, like was like, "Oh, of course they would do something like that," and wasn't offended at all. But to me, I was like, man, this is just like for an area where we just continue to have so many problems. For to do something like that is just foul."
Yeah. Speaking of foul. Where the hell do we go with Roman Reigns at this point? So let's just go right into it. What are we going to do with this guy?
Thing on that show, yes.
I don't even know anymore. Like, I know the way the finish went. They think maybe it didn't take too much away from him, but like they can't keep matching him up with Brock, can they? I mean, like, hasn't this run its course by now? Should we just pivot to Braun Strowman ASAP? We think Roman's still going to get the run with the belt first. Justin, where are you at with Roman Reigns?
When I look at where he's at as a whole, like since he started his single run, it doesn't really bother me because almost the story is always coming up short, whether it be Seth cashing in at 31. He beat Triple H for the title at 32, but it wasn't a very long reign. And that was just once again Seth coming back from an injury and taking it from him.
Well, that was his own doing, remember, too, because he got popped for the wellness violation.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of it more in terms of kayfabe.
Okay. Well, that's why he lost.
Yeah, so he keeps coming up short, and I don't really mind that story. I'm curious where they're going to keep going with it. The only thing that really actually bothers me is that they have two genuine baby faces on Raw that the crowd loves, and Braun Strowman and Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins is doing some of the best work of his career right now. I'm still not as down on Roman Reigns. I don't think the match at the Greatest House Show or the Greatest Sausage Party buried him, but I'm ready for them to. They need to do something else with him. They need to go to somebody else, and they definitely need to get that freaking title off of Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, Brock Lesnar to me is one of the worst WWE champions in recent memory. It's just
he's an albatross on the show.
Yeah,
he's
just off.
You could argue, and we'll talk about Backlash later on in the show. Oh, by the way, there's another quote unquote pay-per-view coming up this weekend. But this whole thing where it's like you've got a select couple guys on the main, that are full-timers like Roman and Braun that kind of dominate everyone else, but they lose to Brock. It's just bad. No one comes out looking good. I mean, I guess Brock does, but I don't understand how this is helping your full-time roster when you've got your two top guys can't beat the baby faces, mind you, can't beat the champion, but they run through everybody else. Mm-hmm. You're just making your full-time roster look like a bunch of chumps, particularly Roman. And, I mean, I started thinking about him. I don't care what anybody says. Like there's this notion, because I think, what was it? It was CM Punk brought it up on the infamous Colt Cabana podcast, right? Where he's like, it's all about Roman, got to make Roman look good, right? And everyone picked up on that. There's this narrative online where, you got to protect Roman Reigns at all costs. And, he's the golden boy. If Roman Reigns is the golden boy, I'd hate to see the way they book somebody who ain't the golden boy. Because Roman Reigns has been booked like shit for the majority of the last 4 years. I would argue you could go back to the Shield breakup. And if I'm in the writing room when they're coming up with that breakup in the summer of 2014, okay? Who did that benefit initially? Well, Seth Rollins. And if you're Vince McMahon and you have it in your mind at that point that Roman Reigns is to become the top babyface for this company. Remember, Daniel Bryan was hurt at the time and they did not know if he was going to come back. I'll get to that in a moment. You can't put him in a position like they did where Seth turns so the heat's on him and you have two baby faces that the audience can choose from, Ambrose and Rollins, or pardon me, Ambrose and Reigns, and a large portion of the audience chose Ambrose at that time. It was very inorganic when they kind of decided to shoot Reigns to the top. Mm-hmm. You know, to me, if you want to make Reigns that guy and get the crowd behind him, you had to have Rollins and Ambrose turn on him and isolate him on the babyface side, where he's the guy. You know, the crowd's pissed that the Shield broke up, and Roman Reigns is the guy, you know, fighting for those people. Mm-hmm. But they didn't do that. And then on top of that, you have Daniel Bryan come back at the end of the year, as we all remember, who had, and this just wasn't Bizarro World or any bullshit like that, okay? This was Daniel Bryan, who had to give up the title due to injury, cuts an incredible promo about his father passing away, and it's in this great story going into the Royal Rumble, how he's got this opportunity to get back in the world title picture, and you basically ensure that your hardcore audience will hate Roman Reigns based on the way that Royal Rumble match was booked. That's not on Roman Reigns. That was completely on the booking. So Roman's like dead going into WrestleMania, right? And Justin brought it up. They have Rollins cash in. That I actually liked because it was a no-win situation with Lesnar and Reigns. But, you know, I mean, he did get over at the end of that year, and he wins the title, right? Punching out Vince McMahon. And he beat Sheamus for the title. Well, then what do? They take the title off. They haven't put the title up in a Royal Rumble. Triple H fucking baby faces himself left and right. And you're killing him again. Like, I just don't see where the strong booking of Roman Reigns is, if you look at his entire singles babyface run.
Yeah, you make some great points, I think, because people always talk. I see that all the time. That Roman's so protected and stuff, but that's the same thing they used to say about Cena. But Cena actually was like winning constantly during his heyday. Yes! And Roman has never, like, yes, it's the biggest detriment to Roman is the booking, the terrible booking surrounding him. It has nothing to do with the crowd reactions. Everyone's going to always talk about how he gets mediocre crowd reactions. That's not necessarily why he hasn't taken off, although that's, you know, that kind of goes hand in hand with the booking. But based on the mixed reactions, he could still be
cool
what they...
to boo him.
Yeah.
When you hear that music, it's just cool to boo him because the WWE's made it that way.
Yeah, exactly. He could still be what they want him to be with the mixed crowd reactions. And funny you should mention the music, because I thought of something as you were talking that I wanted to bring up and see. It kind of goes back to when the Shield broke up. So I was having a discussion last weekend about this with one of my best friends. And he made some points. I didn't really necessarily agree with everything he said, but some of them were interesting points, and I thought it was worthy of discussion on the podcast this week. He thinks that one of the biggest problems with Roman and why he hasn't taken off, and why the fans don't like him, is because, A, he hasn't got far enough away from like the Shield look that he had when he was in the Shield. You know, wearing the same outfit. He came through the crowd for a long time. He still uses the Shield music, that he hasn't really like remade himself at all. And so my buddy went on and on about this, and he thinks that is like one of the biggest problems with Roman Reigns. I disagreed, but I can see where the argument comes in. And I wanted to pose that question to you. Do you guys think that Roman just basically still using the Shield gimmick is hurting him, and he hasn't been able to take off as a character because of that? What do you think, Justin?
I love the question. I think it's probably irrelevant if you look at the history of teams breaking up. Shawn Michaels changed everything. Marty Jannetty kept the rocker gimmick and kind of died with it. Bret Hart kept the Hart Foundation look in music. I can't think of any other ones off the top of my head, but I think that's irrelevant to me. It's always bothered me, but I don't think it's the way they've booked him and the unfortunate, case with the crowd wanting Daniel Bryan at a time when, booking ignored that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and it's not like I said, it wasn't Bizarro World with Daniel Bryan. Like, it was very legitimate. Like, if I would have been fired probably if I worked for the WWE in 2014. I mean, I would have just slammed my hand on that table until the frickin' cows came home. I mean, they should not have tried to push Roman at a time when Daniel Bryan, storyline-wise, had every reason to win that Royal Rumble and was very over. Like, Roman arguably should have been the guy to beat Rusev at that WrestleMania. And, like, if you don't... I wonder what happens if they don't push Roman over Daniel Bryan during that time. And I'm just throwing an idea out there that he was the guy instead of Cena to beat Rusev and end Rusev's undefeated streak. And then Daniel Bryan gets hurt Daniel Bryan did get hurt and was out for 3 years. If they didn't try pushing Roman over Daniel Bryan at that time, and then Bryan gets hurt, is Roman's trajectory completely different and are the crowd reactions completely different?
I think it would be, because I think the Bryan dynamic is what sank him and what the hole that he hasn't been able to climb out of. I think that is like Exhibit A and what went wrong with Roman Reigns. And I think they couldn't have foreseen what happened with Bryan, but when Bryan got injured and left, there is the possibility that if Roman was lurking in the background, they could have gravitated towards him. Because I think the reason the fans pushed against it is because they felt, rightly or wrongly, that Roman was forced down their throats and he wasn't the natural next guy. But if Bryan's taken out of the equation and the fans don't see it as Roman screwing Bryan out of his spot, he definitely would have had a much better chance of being successful, I think.
Yeah, and to answer your question from before, I'm with Justin. I think it's kind of a tertiary or minute thing, him still wearing the vest, coming out to the Shield music, compared to the other issues we've kind of laid out here.
Yeah, let me ask you about that music, too, because that came up in our discussion. I actually really like the Roman Reigns theme song. I think it works for him. My buddy thinks it's one of the worst songs for a top guy, ever.
I get kind of jazzed up for it.
I like it. I do. Yeah. I do like it, especially live. But, he said that when you think of all the other top baby faces, they have a more upbeat, faster song, and his is just too slow and too much of a slog. So I don't know. I wanted to run that by you guys too, because I thought it was an interesting discussion. There's
some of it's on him. He doesn't come out he comes out looking pretty cocky, and we talked about to be fair, there's always two sides to every story. He's not Cena in the sense that he just doesn't come across as the natural babyface John Cena does. John Cena may not like him, but he's a very natural babyface. Mm-hmm. Roman Reigns kind of comes across at times, and we talked about this after Mania show. My buddy's he just comes across like a cocky asshole.
But doesn't every top pro superstar in sports for the most part these days? I mean,
but you got to remember, top pro superstar, they there are people who like him and there are people who hate him.
Yeah.
The mixed reaction is about it's just that look, man, he didn't get that. We got to talk about this. He turned the mics down in Saudi Arabia for his entrance because there were people even booing there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's bad.
Yeah.
Look, to double back, where do we go from here? You posed, well, they can't just keep going status quo, can they? Going back to the Lesnar Reigns well. Can they? Absolutely. But
should they?
Raw is in for a long year if that's still the goal.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say. That's just not. I mean, I said it before and I say it again. When he did win the title at the end of 15 and was getting over, again, Philadelphia, he was cheered at when he won that, when he beat Sheamus. Cheered. They should have done the Lesnar match in Texas. 1 year after, there was no winner. This year, there was no Money in the Bank. That was out of the way. This year, there must be a winner. Frickin' do it. No DQ. You could have brought Austin in as a special enforcer and have Reigns beat as the Lesnar could have won the Rumble to set the rematch up, and they should have done it then.
Yeah,
it's like this whole thing. It reminds me of Sting in the old NWA days. When Sting becomes champion, it's all gonna change. Well, it fucking didn't change. They waited 2 years. And some of it was injury, and them also not having appropriate challengers lined up for him once he won it. But nothing changed when they waited 2 years to crown Sting, and nothing changed. It actually got worse. So if you have the idea in your head, I want Roman Reigns to beat Brock Lesnar, fucking do it, man. Stop screwing us and jerking us around.
Yeah. I don't know what the end game is with Brock here, because the original plan was Brock is just unbeatable and then Roman dethrones him. But like you said, they've built up to that match so many times, and then Roman doesn't beat him that it's like, what's the point anymore? Do they?
He's Lex Luger.
Yeah,
he's Lex Luger.
They've just wasted. They've wasted that to the point where, like, Brock, even though yes he hasn't lost, just doesn't feel like a big deal anymore, like he did a couple years ago. And we talked about how he's just not a great champion, and he's been this albatross on the Raw brand for years now. And we see that he's re-signed for this like per appearance fee he's getting, and it's just outrageous amount of money. Like, is Brock Lesnar even that big of a draw anymore? He was 5 or 6 years ago, but he's been back for a while now. Is he? I don't think he's worth that kind of money. I don't think he's that big of a draw to the wrestling fans anymore. I don't know what we're doing at this point. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. It's time to move on. I think everyone sees that Braun Strowman is kind of that guy lurking back there, and they better not wait too long in it. And I think it's just move right into Braun Strowman beating Brock. Why not?
The only issue is, look, Braun would solve the problem of that with Roman, that the crowd is pretty much universally behind Braun, right?
Yeah.
So if you put it on Braun, okay, you've got a babyface champion that everyone's behind. But I don't know if Braun Strowman actually works great as a world champion. That character.
Yeah, I think it would need to be a short-term thing, and everyone's been talking about this for years, but if they do finally do a Reigns heel turn, a heel Reigns versus Braun feud could be pretty good, I think.
Yeah,
do they have him win Money in the Bank? And that's the impetus for a heel turn? Roman?
Yeah, I could see that.
They've definitely got a lot of options for that one. Is that the next pay-per-view after Backlash?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that could work. It's really the only thing they haven't tried with Roman yet. And if you've got a guy who's universally getting cheered like Braun, I don't think you really would have like we've talked about before, how if Reigns turns, then they're going to cheer him, which might be the case. But if you match him up against Braun, they're not going to cheer him. I don't think that's a concern then. So it might be the way to go.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, to me, it's Lex Luger all over. Like, in the sense that, like, but at least Lex was like the U.S. champion and could go back to defending that title. Like, when I was watching Raw on Monday, and it was just babyface Roman. And by the way, they booked that segment to completely make you think he's an asshole. Okay, then Jinder comes out. All right, whatever. But then they have, like, Owens and Zayn, the hometown heroes, come out. And everyone's going crazy for them. And, you're just looking at Roman, you're like, are you kidding?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of potential champions, and when they finally get the belt off of Brock, what they're going to do. And we were doing our Backlash preview over at Pop Culture, and Jack Snodgrass was making, he's been on the show before, he was making the questions on that we always go through in our preview. It's like a series of questions. And one of the questions he had, it's not really related to Backlash, though he's wrestling on it, is he said, will Seth Rollins win the world title or the Universal title before the end of 2018? And I thought that was a pretty tough question to answer just because of the dynamic, you know, being the Intercontinental Champion and how do they move him back into the world title picture. And we know that he's having a great year. And Justin said maybe this is the best year of his career. You could definitely make that argument. He's having such a great year, but I don't know. Like, it's just thinking about what's going on with Roman and Braun and Brock. Like, I don't know if he is going to be the world champion by the end of the year. I said I went with there'd be maybe a good chance by around Survivor Series he could be back into the picture post SummerSlam at least. But what do you guys think? I wanted to pose that question to you. Do you think Rollins is going to be back as world champion before the end of the year, or is he just not going to fit in?
I think it's certainly possible. You kind of pointed out there's already kind of a log jam with Brock and Roman and Braun. But I think that's who should have it. I think he's possibly the most consistently entertaining part of Raw every week. And boy, let's get that Universal title back on Raw every week. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
I can't see him beating the guy to beat Brock. That's the key. Like, you know, when is Brock losing it? Like, if this Brock thing goes on long, then the answer to your question is no. Because I just don't see them having Seth Rollins be the guy to end Lesnar's title run.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, now that we have the brands are combined for these pay-per-views, you know, they have to have the people who argue there's too many titles in WWE. And there is. You know, you got to have a world champion on both shows. Well, Brock's not on most of the shows.
Yeah, unify him again. Do it.
Yeah, like, to me, I've said it before, because the U.S. title's kind of worthless. One traveling world champion, and then you raise the Universal title could be like a secondary title, because I think the U.S. title has just never worked in the WWE. It's an NWA, WCW title, and I just don't think it has the cachet. And have the Universal title be like the main title of one brand, the IC be the main of the other, and then, you know, the world title's like above brand distinction.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been my kind of view of this.
I think it'd be kind of hard to move it down in prestige at this point, though, the Universal title. I know what you're saying, and that makes sense.
Well, but the goal is not to move it down. It's kind of like to move it up. Like, it would actually be the same, to be honest, because it is based.
So it'd be like elevating the WWE title above it again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what's the question? I mean, you guys have casual fan friends, right? What's the number one? If you have one of these guys who comes over to watch a paper, okay, what's the number one question they always ask? Who's the champion?
Yeah.
My buddies always ask, like, when I have guys, who's the champion? That's always the question they ask. And, like, you wouldn't believe the confused look on their face when I ask, well, there's two brands, so there's, like, two main champions. Like, they're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be one thing if, okay, they had the guys defending it all the time, you know, on both, but they don't.
Yeah. No, I think we talked about it when they created the Universal title. Way back when we started this podcast, we were not a fan of doing that in the first place. And I don't like it. I'd rather have one world champion. And when they finally unified the two world champions, I loved that period in WWE. And I would like to go back to one overarching champion. And like you said, Kyle, now that they have the brands connected on pay-per-view, there's really not the need to have two world champions.
No.
So, good point. Before we get into the Backlash preview, I've just got kind of like some quick fire questions I wrote down that people threw at us on Twitter that I wanted to get to this week. These are kind of wide ranging about different topics. The first one is an NXT question. I know at least one or two of us is pretty high in the sky. Actually, probably all three. Is Tommaso Ciampa one of the best heels of all time? And this was thrown out by our listener, our buddy Joel on Twitter. What do you guys think?
I don't know if it's as much him as it is the angle. Mm-hmm. I think that the angle's really hot. I mean, I would say Miz is, way beyond a better heel in general than Tommaso Ciampa. Tommaso Ciampa's been fantastic. He's pulled off this storyline perfectly. I need to see how he does against somebody else before I can crown him as, the best heel ever.
That was a great take by Justin. Yeah, because all time, that's strong.
Yeah.
But to Justin's point, how much of it is him working opposite Johnny Gargano, who is maybe the best babyface in all of WWE, besides Daniel Bryan, right now? So Justin's right. Like, I imagine Ciampa working on the main roster against someone who's not Johnny Gargano. How does that go? Like, there's so much heat on him, the way they broke the team up and stuff. It was so well done. It is a great angle. He's doing unbelievable heel work as a part of it. But yeah, to Justin's point, we have to see how, to be like one of the all-time great heels, you need to do it in more than one angle, as good as that angle is.
I'll tell you one thing. He's one of the best Twitter users in quite some time.
Yes, he's very good on Twitter.
I swear, like, when I get those alerts on my phone that, 6 or 7 of the people I follow have all liked the tweet, it's like always the Blackheart. It's always him. So, what else do we got here? Okay. We might have got to this a little bit. I feel like this came up last week, but what would we think about an all-women pay-per-view event? Yay or nay?
I am all for the women's revolution, and there's a lot of talented women on the roster right now. I don't know if I watch that. If I watch it, if I watch it, I watch it for, the handful of women that I think are truly, truly talented in the ring. I know that's just an awful thing to say, but I mean, that's because I don't remember where I heard this, but somebody was talking about how SmackDown should just be the women's brand and Raw is just the men's. It's like, I don't think that works, but a women's one-off pay-per-view, I mean, it could work depending on how they booked it, of course.
There would obviously have to be a major issue to anchor it. I'm all for unique concepts and shows. So yeah, absolutely, I think it could happen. And they have enough women to do it. So sure, yeah, it could happen.
I think I'd like it better, almost like as a special edition of Raw or SmackDown first, or like a TV special. See how that went.
As much as 205 Live has been improved in 2018. You could argue that the women deserve a show like that far more than cruiserweights, and cruiserweights could just be integrated into 1 or 2 matches on Raw.
Okay, and lastly here, if Triple H was in charge of WWE instead of Vince McMahon, like he probably will be someday, what would he do differently? Because let me just say first off, I hear from people all the time that, casual fans, people online, even hardcore fans, they'll say NXT is so much better than WWE. Why is NXT so much better than WWE? And I always point to the fact that they have a 1-hour show versus 5 hours of television every week. They have
taped.
Yeah, it's taped. They have a pay-per-view every 3 months versus every month or almost every couple of weeks sometimes here, like we're seeing this month if you count Greatest Royal Rumble. But everyone points to, Triple H kind of being in charge of the NXT brand. What do you guys think he would do? Can you think of anything he would do differently that would radically change if you had to predict? Would it be a major change if Triple H was in charge, or would it be pretty much what we see now in the main roster?
Yeah, stop putting lights on the crowd on special events. Just put them in the dark like in NXT events.
It's true. There was a lot of lights at Mania. My God, everywhere, constantly.
I don't think it would be that different, to be honest with you. I think the only positive that comes quickly to my mind is the synergy between NXT and the main roster. I think, considering NXT is Triple H's baby, and I'm now, keep in mind, he'd be a lot more hands-off NXT if he was in charge of the whole kit and caboodle. But considering that's his baby, I don't think you would have the issue you see sometimes where, these guys get called up from NXT and they kind of, quote-unquote, flounder on the main roster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I agree with that.
And maybe you see different types of guys get pushed. But, Triple H is a bodybuilder type. He comes from, people forget, man, Triple H, particularly when he's involved in the booking, like his character, there's a lot of legit criticisms that have been levied his way through the years.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, that's all I got for the rapid fire. Should we get right to this Backlash preview? We'll finish with that. So let's just, brief thoughts on the matches, predictions like we usually do. We'll start right there with, actually, this is a good one to start with because we were texting about this the other night. Start with Brian and Big Cass. All right, so I think the Big Cass segment, we were kind of on different ends of the spectrum here, or at least me and Justin were, as we were texting.
I was watching it so intently because at the time I was watching Game 1 of the Cavs Raptors.
Uh-huh.
So I see my phone is going off, and I assume it's my dad bitching about the Cavs defense, and I look and it's you two going off about this segment. I'm like, oh, okay, I gotta pay attention to this. That was a real hoot seeing you go back.
All right, I gotta say something about that because I enjoyed it, but I think it was because me and Ryan were watching it in from different viewpoints. I did not watch that as a comedy segment. It was more of to make Big Cass look like an asshole. Not that he's trying to be funny like some arrogant frat boy guy would be trying to be funny. Their goal wasn't for laughs. It was just to make Big Cass look bad, and that's why I thought it was a good progression from the previous week, not because I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know. I see that as
I
I see that as your typical though, booking for Vince McMahon kind of thing. He thinks bringing out the midget dressed up like Daniel Bryan's funny, and he's the only one laughing backstage. I think there is a comedy aspect to it, but I see what you're saying about making Cass an asshole, and that makes sense too. But I did not think it was as good of a segment as the previous week when Cass really blew me away on the mic 2 weeks ago on SmackDown.
Here's the thing, though. I always talk about people and the idea of expectations. Not just in wrestling. The thing is, 2 weeks ago, Big Cass, people weren't really singing his praises. Then he comes out, cuts that promo, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, this guy, they might have something here. And so now when you watch him the second week, you're like, there's an anticipation oh, this is going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of measuring him against a different standard than you did the previous week.
Well, I thought SmackDown overall this week was a pretty weak show, especially the first hour. I thought it was a pretty terrible show, to be honest.
I think that's harsh.
You think so? Because I don't know. On my Twitter timeline, a lot of the people I follow were not high on the show either. But
there wasn't a ton of wrestling, obviously, in the first hour and a half. Mm-hmm. But I think the wrestling we did get was generally good, and quite frankly, there didn't need to be a lot of wrestling on that show. The guys have been beaten have been just worked to death with the Saudi Arabia and the South Africa shows. I mean, you got to give the talent a break, especially with the pay-per-view coming up this week.
Yeah, well, I don't know. The way we cover SmackDown over at Pop Culture is something major happens on the show, we write an article on it, and I was struggling to have anything to write about on Tuesday night. But who do we got?
It was not a newsworthy show.
No,
but not every show has to be newsworthy.
Yeah, but it was the go home show to a pay-per-view. So
Backlash is very much a WWE Network era pay-per-view.
Well, it does have. I mean, this show has quite a bit of potential as far as the card goes. There's some really good matches here.
Yeah, and we're going to probably get a world title change, so maybe it's more newsworthy than I'm giving it credit for.
Yeah. So who do we got, Brian or Cass? I'm going to go with Cass because I think they'll extend this feud a little bit, and I think if Brian wins right away, it's over.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Big Cass. Colin Cassidy. I'm going to call him by his proper name.
Yeah, Cass and Miz interferes.
Okay.
For the finish.
All right. Braun and Bobby versus KO and Kyle's favorite, Sami Zayn.
Hey, I'm higher on Sami Zayn. And by the way, I didn't bring it back. That was foul that they did that Saudi Arabia Iran thing for Heat, but yet they can't have Sami Zayn on the show.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that.
I don't see any way they will have Braun and Lashley lose. And may I just point out that Lashley has some of the most boring music I've ever heard. When it hit on Monday, I was like, "Ooh, who is this? I don't know this music," even though I've heard it a bunch of it.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to criticize Reigns' music, oh boy, that Lashley music, they need to do something with it. They need to call CFO up and do a remix, perhaps.
I hope they do something interesting and let KO and Sammy get the win, but I just don't see how they, don't let Braun and Lashley get the victory.
I would agree. I would also go with Braun and Lashley.
I don't understand why this match was made. We saw it 2 weeks ago. It ended pretty definitively.
Yeah.
Then they were part of a 6-man. Again, ended pretty definitively. And so if I can be Captain Obvious for a minute, there's only 2 possible outcomes here, right? Braun and Lashley win. Well, we've seen that, so that's kind of redundant. Or Owens and Zayn win for the 50-50 booking, and I don't know if you should be doing that. So I just think this is actually poor matchmaking. When this was announced, it kind of caught me by surprise. I get wanting to have 2 of the bigger stars in Braun and Lashley on the show, but this isn't the way I would have done it. I've seen some people hypothesize there could be some tension teased between Braun and Lashley, and maybe they go in that direction. But other than that, I got nothing. I don't. The match was great 2 weeks ago, but I don't know what storyline purpose this serves.
Well, speaking of who knows, let's go into the who gives a shit match of the night, which is Jeff Hardy and Randy Orton for the U.S. title, from my perspective. I think I'd probably have to go with Jeff retaining here, but I don't really care too much. What do you guys think?
Yeah, unfortunately, same as you. I don't care, but I think Jeff retains to continue this feud that I'm guessing will eventually lead to a Randy Orton heel turn.
You guys aren't going to like this. I've actually kind of enjoyed Randy Orton the last couple
Let me
days.
throw out a Kyle Ross. Oh, no.
Hey, Ryan,
no.
Ryan, can you go ahead and mute Kyle? We'll just go ahead and finish this.
I don't mind laid back. I don't give a fuck U.S. title picture, Randy Orton.
Oh, no.
It's a fine spot on the card for him, and yeah, this match is 2008 written all over it. But I don't know. I'll tell you what, Jeff Hardy needs a better. Everyone's obviously rightfully going to malign Jinder Mahal for that awful spot when it was the wind, not the whisper, that got him at the greatest Royal Rumble ever. But Jeff Hardy wasn't exactly any great shakes in that match either. That was a, dare I say, 2003-like Jeff Hardy performance. So hopefully he's better here. Orton's solid enough. I can't see. There's really no reason to go back to Orton, I don't think. So I'll make it 3 for 3 and Jeff retains.
All right. And then this one should be good. The IC title match, Rollins and The Miz. I would think Rollins would have to win here because I don't see the IC title and the US title both being on SmackDown.
Agreed.
Yeah, I was thinking about this one earlier, like how this match is so ridiculous that it's even on the card because, like, you look at it, it's like, well, obviously Seth Rollins wins because the Intercontinental title has to stay on Raw. But, I started thinking, I was like, man, talk about the all-time, like, getting heat and pissing off the fans. How amazing would it be? You get Miz on SmackDown because everybody wants this feud with Daniel Bryan, but then all of a sudden he wins the Intercontinental title and goes back to Raw. That would be effing incredible. As much I don't want that to happen, but that would be freaking incredible.
It'd be one way to push that feud back and kind of delay it more.
Yeah, they could do it as just a special attraction match at SummerSlam.
Well, not that it means anything, but I know that Miz and Bryan are advertised for house shows like throughout this month. So I don't think they're going to do that, but card subject to change. So
depending how quickly they want to. I mean, obviously, like you just said, they're doing that match at the house shows. If they have Miz cost Bryan the match against Cass, I can see Bryan coming out and doing a receipt here.
Yeah,
and costing Miz.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Kind of keep guys both strong in defeat.
Yeah. All right, we got our first WrestleMania rematch of the night. Nia Jax taking on Alexa Bliss in her return to the ring in the WrestleMania 34 rematch. I don't see them taking the belt off of Nia this soon. So I would have to go with Nia Jax.
Where's Alexa Bliss been? What's she been up to?
Reportedly having some surgery and recovering.
Okay.
I believe we hinted at that a few weeks ago. Kyle was hinting at that night.
Yeah, Nia Jax. They should probably do the squash that they should have done at WrestleMania.
Although I believe this may have been her second surgery in that regard.
I've heard that.
Since she was a bodybuilder before, she just had a different size before.
She was having surgery to become even more of a enhancement talent.
Yes.
Oh.
Ew.
Okay, so wait, Justin, you had who now? I lost my
Nia Jax.
Okay, Nia, yeah.
This kind of feels a little lame duck, which is kind of what I warned about when I argued that maybe Alexa should have retained at WrestleMania because the dynamic of Nia as champion and Alexa as challenger isn't that great. Even though I think Nia, those fall PSAs she does are great, but I don't know. I just don't think anyone buys Alexa regaining the title, and I'm not sure there's a justifiable reason that she should.
No. Yep. I think we're all in agreement there then. The other women's title match, Carmella and Charlotte Flair. I think Carmella would keep the belt here, in my opinion, with some kind of interference to cost Charlotte the match. So one of Carmella's buddies comes out from the back.
Iconics.
Probably the Iconics and cost Charlotte.
Man, this is not good pod that I'm just agreeing with everything you're saying. It's like you're reading my mind. It's the title is definitely going back to Charlotte, but I think it's too soon, and they're going to work this rivalry for as long as they can.
Yeah, they could do like a DQ or some lame fuck finish, but Carmella's not losing the title is all I know.
Yeah. All right, the top two matches. So we just spent like half the show on them, but Roman Reigns and Samoa Joe. Now this one is a little more difficult to predict. It should be a pretty good match. Joe has been great since he came back, so it would make sense for him to get a win, but at the same time, Reigns hasn't got a win in a while, so I don't know. I can't really decide on this one, guys. Are we going to get another messed up finish, or?
It's tough to say if the angle is actually that, Roman is coming up short lately. And I think Joe could certainly use a big victory coming back from an injury. Then I could definitely see him going over. Watching John Cena for a decade in me tells me that Roman's going over here to get some of his juice back after the WrestleMania loss and the, quote unquote, greatest Royal Rumble loss. Man, it's a tough one. This and the next match are definitely, to me, the only two intriguing matches of the show. I'm gonna go Roman Reigns. He's going to get some of his juice back. I don't think. I think it would. Man, I don't know. This is good. This is good. I like where we're at with this match. Yeah, Samoa Joe.
What? Did you change?
Yeah, I changed. I changed. I talked myself out of it mid-sentence.
I hate the narrative of Reigns winning here as a babyface. I absolutely hate it. Again, I want to say they can't do it, but they can. And it's funny that they tease Samoa Joe coming for AJ Styles' title because, spoiler alert, I don't think AJ Styles is going to be the champion after this show. You know, if I did, then I would absolutely think Joe's going to go over here. But I guess that kind of, gives them an out with Roman. But, man, I'm going... It is hard, but I'm going Samoa Joe, too. Shame on me. I'll be made to look stupid.
Oh, man. All right, I haven't picked. Well, WWE logic would tell me Reigns would win because Joe has just ran him down like a school child on the microphone for weeks now and looked like the better guy. So if I'm trying to think like them, they're like, God, Roman's got to get the win to get his juice back, like Justin said. But then at the same time, the more
I just
reasonable...
hate that narrative.
Yeah,
like
right.
Roman's gonna beat back another challenge, but now is he ready for Brock Lesnar? Now is he ready to tame the beast? Like, we've seen this before, man, and it doesn't end well.
Joe has just been so good. I don't want to see him lose clean to Roman Reigns the way Reigns has been going the last 4 weeks. So,
do they do a non-finish?
That's what I was just because it is, interbrand match like this, they could. Man. But, like, if someone... Are we saying interference? Like, does Brock come out and just beat the hell out of Roman?
No.
I don't know. Like, what kind of interference would they do?
I mean, it would be par for the course. I don't know. Like, it just becomes a wild brawl and, double DQ.
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, the big question is, where does each guy go? Go for Money in the Bank? Are they just both going to be? Because it's interesting that I assume that the Money in the Bank ladder matches are going to feature performers from both brands. Now, so it's gonna be like half the guys are from Raw, half are from SmackDown. I could see both these guys in that match. And so if that's the case, I hate to say this, but I'm not sure it matters who wins.
Tell you what, this might be where the universe ends. Like, they're going to be brawling so hard. And considering what Roman Reigns' real name is, the winner's going to be Samoan Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh man, I don't know. I guess if I had to pick a winner, I think I would also go with Joe, just because he's been so great since he's been back, and God, how do you beat him? But I think the odds are better we get a false finish or a DQ finish or something like that. We'll see. But I kind of going into the next match, I'm in agreement with Kyle. I think we're going to get a title change here. I know we said that last week, but man, the master of the low blow himself, Shinsuke Nakamura, has been so great of late. I think it would be a huge mistake to not put the title on him. And as much as I love AJ Styles, his title runs got stale. It's time to freshen up the brand. I would love to see Nakamura get the title. Now, his heel character. So I'm going to go with the title change here in the main event.
No, for fuck's sake, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, if Nakamura doesn't win the title here, I mean, obviously his babyface run was not what we expected, but, if he loses here, he just kind of becomes an upper mid-card heel with, it's just whatever, so, I don't know. Put the title on him.
Okay, so we're pretty much in agreement across the board here, guys. Nothing nothing too outlandish to discuss. I think in the ring it'll be a pretty good show. I don't think we're going to get anything too wild, but who knows? Who knows? Any closing thoughts or any predictions on where they're going to go coming out of Backlash as far as title feuds or anything like that?
No, that's, I guess that's kind of down as I am on some of this. That is kind of the best part of where we're at right now is if you put a little bit of faith into WWE, they can go almost anywhere, kind of going in and coming out of this pay-per-views. They've got a lot of options open to them, a lot of good options.
Will they take any of them, though?
Oh, probably not.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to make a prediction right now. My prediction is that at SummerSlam, we'll see a heel Nakamura with the title taking on Daniel Bryan.
I agree with that.
SmackDown World Title match.
What's the Raw World Title match?
At SummerSlam?
The Universal Title match.
Okay. I could see Braun and Brock finally happening then, although I hope they do it earlier than that, to be honest.
I've heard some rumors of Lashley Lesnar will happen at that show.
Oh, God. Please, no. I just don't think Lashley's a big deal. I think they think he's a bigger deal than he is.
You know what they need to do? So I was watching the 6-Man, which I thought was poorly kind of put together, given the dynamics of the night in Montreal. You had, I don't think anyone really came out of it looking the way they needed to. Braun got cheered, and they tried making him look super strong, but they had him do it at the expense of 2 hometown heroes, which is certainly an odd way to book. But I was thinking of your comments on Lashley as I was watching that match, and part of the reason maybe you feel that way is they haven't really done any character work with him since he came back. They had him come out and beat up Elias, and now he just kind of comes out and teams up with Braun Strowman.
Yeah.
Like, he hasn't really, it's like, who is he? What is he after? What is, they've done no real character work with him. I think that's something moving forward that we need to see from the writing team.
So he has the NXT syndrome, you're saying, when they bring up these guys from NXT and assume everyone knows everything about him.
Yeah, kind of. I guess it's just like, all right, he's a big, strong guy, but, but I don't know if it does him any favors to be teaming with Strowman, who is also a big, strong man that is very over with the crowd.
Yeah.
Point. I don't know if that's doing him any favors.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. That's a good point. All right. Well, we should have plenty to talk about on next week's show. Justin, any closing comments?
No, man, I got nothing.
We made it through the show, man. No tornado. And that's right. Kyle, you're missing the next 2 weeks. Is that right?
I will. Bonjour.
All right. Well, it'll either be Justin and myself going solo, like we've done that many times in the past, or maybe we'll get a guest co-host on in your spot while you're enjoying Europe, Kyle.
Yes.
I hope they let you back into the country. Don't bring anything illegal back.
Yeah, get it all out of your system over there.
All right. Well, with that said, we're going to take it home for episode 57. I am glad that we didn't have to stop. No tornado came through Justin and I's town tonight, so we are good to go for Backlash.
I shudder to think how many tadpoles are out in the backyard, though.
God knows what's going on in that pond over in Cleveland,
fucking
Ohio.
Frogs, literally.
Dude, you're going over to France. You shouldn't be talking about like that.
Yeah, man, you're going to be seeing a lot of love over there, by the way, in France.
At least somebody's getting some in this house. I'll say that much. Hey-o!
Watch out in France, man. It is the country of lovers. Keep an eye on your wife. You can't trust them Frenchmen.
La Resistance going to be over there? Like, worry about Rene Dupree doing his dance over there or what?
Hey, there's an interview we could probably get on the show, guys. Let's contact Rene Dupree and see if he'll come on Top Rope Nation. Have a very in-depth conversation about La Resistance.
I actually was listening to a little Rene Dupree talk, not him talk, but discussion about Rene Dupree on one of the Bruce Pritchard shows this afternoon while I was driving around. I had it on. They were talking about Rene Dupree.
All right, well, everyone, enjoy WWE Backlash on Sunday night. Check us out on Twitter at Top Rope Pod. Enter the contest I talked about at the beginning of the show. Find us at topropenation.com. Check you guys out next week.
Peace.